Hi, I'm Jonathan J from dealmakers.co.uk. I want you to meet Richard, who bought multiple businesses after coming onto my Mastermind program. Let's find out how he did it.
There's usually kind of 3 stages of growth, which is you've got revenue, but you have no operating procedures and you don't have any professional management. So if you go on holiday, owner operator, if you go on holiday for 2 weeks, you'll come back to a whole stack of emails and there'll be a fire or 15 fires that you have to go and put out. The second level of maturity is you've got operating procedures. You can go on holiday for 2 weeks, you come back, you haven't got that many emails and there might be 1 fire, right? And then there's the nirvana, which is you've got a professional management team, you go on holiday for a year, you come back, the business is bigger. Go on holiday again. So when I started my business, I'd come from an agency where I'd been a contract technical director there. And there was a client services director there who ended up leaving and creating a little company called Sideshow. And I watched them from the sidelines. And in fact, we did collaborate on a few things. And they ended up buying this other agency called Strawberry Soup. And then they bought another agency called Vertical Leap a couple of years later. And I started getting really interested because their turnover was going up and up and up. Now, turns out by 2020, they ended up getting some PE backing. And I think they're about 150 million now. So Tony at Sideshow did a really, really good job. And I was always quite envious from the side of him doing that. So that's where I kind of got my idea about actually, well, why don't I just start a group? So what did I know about M&A at that point? Not a lot. The most I knew about M&A was from this guy, Edward Lewis in Pretty Woman. I don't know if you've ever seen the film. So I thought I was going to kind of turn into him and be very suave and sophisticated, but I didn't know where to go and find him to find out how to buy a business, because I really wanted to talk to him. So I punched in to YouTube, how to buy a business. I got this guy. Actually, that was amazing because Jonathan ended up changing the course of my life, I would say. Because through everything I learned with him, I was then able to go out and start to actually take my ideas and put them into reality. So he told me to send letters. I mean, he tells everyone to send letters, right? That's one of his big things. So we wrote letters. We wrote letters and we then stuffed the envelopes ourselves and we put stamps on them ourselves, first class stamps. And I know there's always this thing of like, oh, should I write the letter and what color ink it should be? We basically made the letter look as good as possible. So it wasn't franked, it wasn't kind of machine printed. It was something that looked really, really like we meant business, I guess, is what I'd say. And we packed those letters and we sent them out. And then we waited. And then we sent more letters out. And then we waited. And we sent more letters out. And then we waited. And then we got a buy, which is very exciting. So a company called Marama got in touch with us. I didn't know really much about them when they got in touch with us. And we sent over an NDA and we started talking to them. So that then ended up being, we found out that they had obviously been impacted a little bit by COVID. They lost a few clients, it was the usual thing. And also they had a potential acquisition that fell through just before we contacted them with a letter. So those letters really do work, which is good news. Had a call with them. They said they wanted 170 to 180. Obviously they meant 180. I don't know why people put ranges when they say that. And then we went back and said 150. Anyway, ended up at 165. We then put the heads of terms together So this is what the heads of terms look like when we sent it out for that deal. And they basically said, well, yeah, why don't we do this deal? Which was fantastic. So this is the deal timeline. So if you take the horizontal line as completion, we paid 55 on completion. And then we put in an R&D claim for the last 2 years for 95 grand. So Marama had been doing a lot of research and development on the Umbraco platform, but the guy who owned it didn't realize that. So essentially we paid the 165, but we actually did the R&D claim for 95, which gave us a net basically of 70,000, if my maths is right, essentially to purchase that business. Now, the reason that we did that is because I was on a training call with Jonathan, and I remember him talking about that. He didn't talk exactly about R&D, but he talked about once you get hold of the business, you could do other things to then go back, look at the previous year's accounts, work out if there's any other savings. Well, that's what we did. There was a bit of a problem. Now, I'm not an accountant, so if the accountant's in the room, this might all be really, really obvious. But we didn't notice, or we didn't think about the director's loan account on the balance sheet when we made the acquisition. So we should have negotiated this. But what actually happened was we got a phone call just before the deal was about to close. And they went, oh, you know, the director's loan account is just a paper exercise. We'll just scrub that off. And we went, okay. And then, yeah, we should have used that to negotiate. I won't get into the ins and outs of the material impact of that. However, it does mean that we've, on our group balance sheet, we've now got a larger amount than 165 because that had to be. Anyway, I'm not going to get into the specifics. Point is that there's these little things that can sometimes trip you up, and it's best to learn about them.
You're watching this because you're interested in buying a business, so get my business buying toolkit free of charge. 17 downloads, videos, reports, and my books as well, completely free of charge. The link is right below.
So the next deal I want to talk about is this one. So this takes us to Katowice in Poland. When this came through, I had no idea where Katowice was, by the way. So I got this email. Actually, it's a LinkedIn from someone I'd known for a while who happens to now be running an M&A brokerage. But actually, network's really, really important. I know letters are important, but actually your network's really important because you can get more deal flow off your network as well as the letters. Don't do one or the other, do everything. So he sent this through and said, oh yeah, by the way, it's December the 1st, right? So you know what's going to happen. There's this business, would you be interested? Anyway, we said yes. So the business was in distress. And so that message then culminated in many, many hours of conversations over Zoom with the owners of the business, trying to work out how we can help them and how we can rescue them, bring them into the group and get them something out the other side. But anyway, we ended up doing the deal at the end of Jan. It turned out that we ended up doing it at the end of Jan. Yeah, it was complicated. And I'm going to get onto the complications because I know you're all interested. But this document is actually the statement of affairs, which insolvency practitioner files at company's house. So you can go and download these off other companies and you can see the kind of state that they were in. But the bottom line is they owed £500,000. As you can see, we paid £19,000 for the assets of that business. So we basically brought the debtor book and all the clients and the goodwill, brought that. One interesting bit was, though, that we had a bit of complication, something to note around the deferred income. So obviously, if you're in an agency, especially, you get paid for stuff, but you haven't done the work yet, which gets called deferred income. And then there's also the other side of that, which is work in progress, stuff you've done, but you haven't invoiced yet. So you have to be really, really careful when you're doing that deal. So there was a lot of arguing about the deferred income on that deal with the liquidator. The other challenge we had is that, and they are a fabulous team. Not all of these people are there now, but some of them still are. And they were just amazing people. and they really worked with us to make that deal happen. But there was some crazy stuff going on in the way that the business was operating, and hence why they were a bit broken. There was no revenue recognition, there was no invoice forecasting, there was no plan. It was just a bit of a mess. So again, completion, we paid that 19,000 over, and then we actually paid 1% of revenue over 12 months, but I couldn't be able to do 12, so I did 6 and then just called it 2. But you get what I mean. And then it was about 29,000. My maths isn't quite right, but you'll forgive me tonight. Because actually, that whole bit looks great. And you go, oh, you've done really well there, considering the business is now turning over quite a bit more, right? But the problem is you're not including flights, hotels, expenses. There's Polish SPA, Polish lawyers, notary fees, herring, vodka. It all adds up. It really does. So yeah, it looks like it was the deal of a century, but actually it took so much hard work to do. I actually lost some of my hair. So.
Are you a business owner and you want to grow via acquisition? Then you need to be part of my Mastermind program, where we hold your hand all the way through the entire process to make sure that your first acquisition is a resounding success. I put some information in the video description below.
But now it's Head Channel. So they build enterprise level custom software for companies. Just finished a large pathology lab management system. Just building out a whole new thing for law firms. Actually, a new type of client management, case management system. So Marama, our investment, we've generated about 124,000 in cash. It's probably about a 1.7 times return at the minute. Not huge. However, everything's done and dusted now. So we've got a managing partner in place now. So we're expecting that to do a lot better over the next few years. But interestingly, that's the kind of thing, you buy a business for 3 times, you expect 3 years to get your money back, unless you can grow it or cut costs, But the other two, I didn't talk about coherence today, but that was a whole different thing. But actually, the other two have been phenomenally successful. But that doesn't show you all the hard work and effort and pain put into it to get it there. So what have we learned? I think that's probably what you're all asking, right? So I threw up some stuff here. In my opinion, distressed, easy to find. We seem to be coming across them all the time. We may have another one that we're completing on Monday, but we don't know. Also, if you do distress, try not to be a director. I discovered that is a problem. And speak to me afterwards if you want the details as to why. You got to watch out for 2P, obviously, because you need to transfer the staff over unless you're not, and the law's a bit weird about that. And if you're going to do distress, I'd also say find a good restructuring advisor. So there's plenty of them out there who can do restructuring stuff, and they are invaluable in that world. I'd also say profitable, buying a profitable business, harder to find because you have to convince people and they're not desperate to sell, unlike in the other scenario, but it's so much easier to do that. The Marama deal was so much easier. So much easier. And remember, EBITDA is a good measure, but it's not reality, and people manipulate it, including us. So, ourselves, we have a tendency to do that. I mean all of us, you know what I mean? And you need to work out how long you want to wait to get your money back. One tiny thing before we get into the epilogue, and I'll move a little bit quicker at that point. So this is really interesting. So I'm a massive fan of Paul Graham. I don't know if anyone who knows who Paul Graham is. So he built one of the first e-commerce platforms on the web back in 1997 called ViaWeb and sold it to Yahoo. Then he created Y Combinator, and he invested in Sam Altman's original business. And we all know who Sam Altman is now, so that's good news. And he was at an event with Brian Chesky. Does anyone know who Brian Chesky is? Yeah. And so Brian Chesky, and this is the real incredible piece, goes, I got loads of people to give me advice, and their advice was hire good people and give them the room to do their jobs. And then he said, it was absolute flipping disaster. Right? Now, I don't mean that you should rush out and start micromanaging everyone. But what I do want to kind of get across is that I think there's a couple of different mindsets. There's the entrepreneurial mindset and there's the managerial mindset. And really, really good managers, of which I'm not a really, really good manager. I'm not a really, really good manager. They're brilliant at hiring people and motivating them, and they don't really need to know the detail. But on the other side of it, if you're an entrepreneur and you're driving something forward like a group, you need to know the detail. You need to be across it, and don't be scared of doing that, because a lot of those deals that I talked about, there was things that we would have made mistakes of if I hadn't been in the detail. We still did make mistakes. And thank goodness for Jonathan. That's all I can say. As I talked about, I talked you through 2 deals that we did, Head Channel and Marama. These are all the other ones that we've done. Then we had a massive wait. And now we've just brought Mooch Creative Studio on board as well, who do amazing things with creative, especially brand and 3D. Our portfolio services. So this is something that I think Jonathan going on about. So as a group, we have portfolio services team, and they help across all these different areas. And that's really massive because it means that we get to track and keep all the group businesses on track. We know what's happening in them because we're kind of joined with them. And then we've developed this. So actually in each business, it's kind of lopsided, but we have business directors in each of those different areas that look across the whole group. But what we tend to say to companies when we go and talk to them about coming on board with a group and investing in them is we say there's usually kind of 3 stages of growth in the business, which is you've got revenue, but you have no operating procedures and you don't have any professional management. So if you go on holiday, owner operator, if you go on holiday for 2 weeks, you'll come back to a whole stack of emails and there'll be a fire or 15 fires that you have to go and put out. The second level of maturity is you've got operating procedures. You can go on holiday for 2 weeks. You come back, you haven't got that many emails and there might be 1 fire, right? And then there's the nirvana, which is you've got a professional management team. You go on holiday for a year, you come back, the business is bigger. Go on holiday again. That's what I say. Obviously, and I mean, these are just rough guides, but we're looking to find, we're looking for the hard cases. I don't know why we decided to do this, but we're looking for the hard cases down the bottom. And then we're putting in the operating procedures, and then we're putting in the management. And then we've got zones. So technology services and marketing technology services. And we tend to only go for things in those areas. We don't really want to go out too outside of those areas, but never say never. And then our process is we find an attractive market. And what we mean by that is Umbraco, for instance, that's a very attractive market right now. We find the targets, we get a bunch of execs that we can bring on as Neds, and we know who's going to what's it, and then we make the investment, and then we support them, strengthen their board, improve their operational ability, and then have a much better market fit at the end of it. And this is our current portfolio. So we have Anktech are over in Jaipur. So we've got, we own part of that business. There's about 80 developers out there. And then Always On, BotForge, Every Interaction, and Malmolzana are all part of Coherence. They drive them. Talked about Head Channel. Libra Team's the other side of the business, which is out based in Poland, which is just basically developers. You can rent a developer. And then we've got Marama, talked about Upstart, which is a consulting business. That one didn't go very well, so I didn't talk to you about that. It's a bit sad. Not everything goes well. Don't worry about it. Just move on to the next deal. And that's it. Thank you very much.